An 8-year-old child is dead after being detained by Border Patrol in Texas. Now, this unfortunate death adds to the death toll among desperate people who are seeking refuge in the United States. Let's get into some of the details about this horrific situation. According to US Customs and Border Protection, the child died following a quote medical emergency while held with her family. The CPB issued a statement which said, emergency medical services were called to the station and transported her to the local hospital where she was pronounced dead. Now, no details were released about the child's identity or cause of death or the welfare of her family. But per protocol, the United States Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility will be investigating. But this is unfortunately not the only tragedy. It comes just less than a week after a teenager died while detained at a facility. Per this headline from The Guardian, unaccompanied Honduran teen dies in US custody as Title 42 expires. Investigators trying to determine cause for teen's death, which occurred in a Florida shelter on Wednesday. Now, Honduran officials identified the dead child as Angel Eduardo Maradiega Espinoza. From The Guardian, Angel Espinoza was admitted into the Gulf Coast Jewish Family and Community Services Shelter in Safe Harbor, Florida on the 5th of May without being accompanied by a parent or guardian. 5 days later, he was taken to a nearby hospital after being found unconscious and was declared dead after an hour of CPR attempts. News of Espinoza's death arrived a day after the United States ended Title 42. And just as a reminder, the restrictions blocked the right of many migrants to claim asylum at the United States-Mexico border, citing health concerns related to COVID-19. Now, Joe Biden's administration has replaced Title 42 restrictions with new measures aimed at preventing and deterring people from entering the border illegally. The White House has sent 24,000 Border Patrol agents and officers to the border to enforce the new restrictions. A humanitarian crisis at the United States-Mexico border does exist and it continues, but it's not the one that conservatives would have you believe it is. But this is really because of the United States government's failure to reform the dysfunctional, outdated, and underfunded immigration and asylum system, particularly the changes that occurred during the Trump administration that, I can't find a better word to describe than inhumane. Dan, what are your thoughts on this and the, in my opinion, unwillingness of the Biden administration to, approach this from a position of care and empathy?
I agree with a lot of what you said there. There's an inability to think about this with empathy. There is a lack of care and a total showing of inhumanity when we're looking at these situations of immigration. Not to both sides it too much, but I think this is when it comes to issues of migration in this country, it's when you can see most when we have two conservative parties, an outright fascist one, and maybe not fascism or like fascism light one on the second hand with the border here. Because not only are we failing to think about, how do we handle this humanitarian crisis at the border that's happened through Democratic administrations and Republican administrations, but especially because especially on the right, you have an entire apparatus that's meant to take away the historical learnings we could know about. Why are all of these countries in the global South and Central America so destabilized that people are seeking asylum in America? What historical political decisions were made within the past 50 or 60 or 70 years that might have led us to where we are today? No, we're trying to take away that history. So not only are our politicians turning a blind eye to it, but we can't even teach the broader public to, be a little bit more skeptical when Fox News shows these images of caravans coming on the border. So it's a systemic failure all around.
I couldn't agree more. And I worked in immigration law a little bit during the end of the Trump administration and then the beginning of the Biden administration. And it really did a lot to change my perspective. I was always pro-immigration, but getting to meet the people seeking asylum and to see the inner workings of the immigration process and specifically the asylum process. And most of my clients are people who didn't even want to come to the United States. They would love to have stayed in their home country and stayed with their family there and been around the resources that they had, connected with there, but were forced to come to the United States out of desperation. So the framing of immigration by the right wing, I think, is particularly despicable once you start to understand, like from a human perspective, the reasons that people are forced to come here. A lot of them created by the United States and the conditions that they've created in Latin America and in South America. Any last thoughts before we move on to this next story?
No, I mean, I'm glad that on the left we're trying to push a better perspective on this. We just definitely have to keep fighting because there's a lot of Democrats who are choosing to not see the situation for what it is.